So I've got another hidden gem for you here in Melbourne. This is the Royal Society of Victoria building, built in 1859. This is the heyday of Melbourne. It was when Melbourne was the second biggest city in the British Empire. Pretty big, eh? Pretty amazing. But I brought you here because of a story that I think you'll find interesting. It's the story of Burke and Wills, which is one of those famous stories in Australian history. And Burke and Wills were two explorers. They had a terrible ending to their exploration fates, right? So they had the job of going from Melbourne all the way up to the top of Australia, Gulf of Carpentaria, 2,500 kilometres or so, maybe actually more like 3,500 kilometres. A massive, massive hike. And they decided to take a shed load of gear with them, including camels, including even a massive wooden table with marble tops and all sorts of crazy things like this. Here they are. Actually, this is a little sketch of them heading out from in the centre of Melbourne, really. 15,000 people turned up to actually see them go. Now, Burke and Wills, what you've got to know about that is that their plan was simple, and that was they would get to a little place called Cooper's Creek, which was just on the very bottom of Queensland, set up a little camp there, because that was kind of the extent of European exploration at that point. That would be their camp, and then they would head off even further north after that. So they get to the camp, and then just 4 of them go up to the Gulf of Carpentaria. What they ended up doing was a terrible trip. They didn't have enough food, and by the time they got back, it was just Burke and Wills, and the third man was King. And they arrived at Cooper's Creek only hours after their party, who was waiting for them, had left to go back to Melbourne. Right? So they missed them by hours. And the party thought, okay, well, if they do arrive after us, we'll bury some food and some supplies for them, and we'll have a tree which will carve into the tree the letters dig, dig here, and under that place they can actually get this food. Well, they got the food, realised that the party had just left hours before because the fire was still hot, but they were too knackered to actually go and follow them. So they had the food and they just waited it out, and then as they got a bit of their strength back, they decided, okay, we're going to head off towards South Australia, see if that's the fastest way back. And as they headed out, the party who'd left had come back, just in case. It was a double checking, like maybe they had come back later. They came back and they didn't find Burke and Wills and King there, because they'd already headed off down to South Australia, and so they just figured they'd died. So off they went. Well, Burke and Wills and King spent a number of days out in the desert, no food, very little food. They were suffering from scurvy, and both Burke and Wills died. King, by the way, befriended an Aboriginal tribe and survived. Right? He lived with them for about a year before he was discovered again and brought back to Melbourne. So here they were so close to, getting all the way up to the top of Australia and back again and back to Melbourne, but just through some little stuff-ups, ended up not making it there at all. Now, this room is really important because this is where all the decisions were made for the expedition. But I want to show you something, another little photo. Come this way. When they eventually found the remains of Burke and Wills, they actually sort of laid them out in state in this room for quite a time, and people could file through this place, and it was a real place of reverence, actually. And they became part of the mythology of Australia. Everyone in Australia knows Burke and Wills, and it's kind of a weird thing. Australia seems to really love people who've failed a little bit, or people who are on the edge, or sort of not with the mainstream. I'm thinking of Ned Kelly is another one, an outlaw, right? So anyway, this is another place to go and check out when you're in Melbourne. Lots of stories associated with it. Great place to hire out as a venue. There's a library here, there's theatre, all sorts of stuff that you can use. A lot of it built in the 1860s, and it's pretty much how it was back in the day. So you'll get to see what it feels and looks like from 150 years ago.